Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of JKL Media Reviews. And today, it's just me and Karen, just a dynamic duo. Good morning, Karen. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Of
Awesome.
course, it won't be the same without Jesse, but we shall try to do
True.
our best. Jesse is away on vacation, and he also, what do you call that? And tagged out because
Yeah.
he found the subject matter of what we're going to discuss today a little bit too intense for his liking. Though he did
Yep.
mention his wife watched it and she quite enjoyed it. So, um, of
But
course,
I get it.
I'm referring to the British mini-series, I guess you could call it. It was only 4 episodes called Adolescence, and it's a crime drama about a typical family anywhere in the world, really, a husband, wife, son and daughter, and besides a parent's most worst dream of losing a child or having a child kidnapped, this one deals with the fact that their son has killed somebody. And it's a interesting series in that it takes Karen, you've probably heard the saying about if I wish I could have been a fly on the wall. And
Yeah.
so that's the premise of this series, is that each episode is one nonstop camera shot, and the effect of that is quite interesting, and we'll get into that in our discussion. But before we do, I'd just like to hear your overall thoughts of this little series.
Yeah. Super impactful. And I want to be right up front. I don't have kids. And that's by design. We didn't really want kids. So I'm coming from this at a slightly different angle. And I think that was what Jesse's issue was. It hit very close to his heart,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think that the quality of this is undeniable. And so enjoying it, whether you have kids or not, I think is a good thing. But I just wanted to, mention that up front, that I'm kind of seeing this from a different perspective. It's that there's not a lot I like personally identify with
Right.
in the show, but man, was it good.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned off the top, this is a British TV show. It stars, these names may or may not be familiar to you, but we'll just quickly run through them. Stephen Graham, who's been in quite a few things. I think I recognize him from other stuff. He stars as the father, Eddie Miller. His wife is played by Christine Tremarco as Amanda Miller. I'm not familiar with her. The most interesting role is obviously the boy, the son who commits the murder, who's Owen Cooper, and he has a pretty amazing third episode.
Mm.
And he plays Jamie Miller. And then there's Emily Pease, who plays Lisa Miller, his older sister. Then we have some other actors that play police officers. Ashley Walters as D.I. Luke Bascombe, Faye Marseille as D.S. Misha Frank, and I think there's other characters there, but I don't think that we really have to go into that. And for us in the North American audience, probably a lot of these names are unfamiliar. But the thrust of the show is it doesn't try to understand what happened. It really does just give you a fly in the wall perspective. There's maybe some minor allusions to the fact that their son was locked up in his room with a computer, which I think is interesting because I think as a parent, I can relate to that because my son does that. So it's probably something that a lot of other parents worry about because you just don't know what they're exposing themselves to on the internet. Now, my son's 10 years older than the boy. That's, I think the boy in the show is 13 or something like that. So it's a bit of a different dynamic, but still, I think this is a common scenario that a lot of parents face nowadays with their kids, because like once they get on a computer, the internet is like a wide open minefield, and you have no idea what your kids are doing at any given moment on there or who they're talking to. So that was interesting. The 4 episodes, basically the first one deals with the crime, and this is not a show that's built around, well, did he do it or not? That's made plain from the beginning, pretty early, about halfway through the first episode, that he did do the crime. We'll talk a little bit more about that one. And then the second one is the police investigation. The third one is basically a psychiatrist interviewing Jamie about why he, about his mindset. And then the fourth one shows the impact on the family. So, going to throw a bit of a curveball, Karen. Which episode of the four did you feel was the most impactful, or the one that you, I can't really say these are enjoyable episodes, but the ones that you were the most impacted by?
Yeah, that's actually easy. I loved episode 3 with Brioni, Aaron. I don't know whether it's Doherty or Doherty. I know they pronounce it differently in some places, but as Brioni Ariston, I'm doing poorly with pronunciation today. But man, her performance in that episode was amazing, and I think it felt the most real to me. Not that the rest didn't, but this one was really engrossing to me.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Yeah, I think the third episode is the most showy, but I think the one that impacted me the most was the fourth one, was the parents, the family trying to go about their lives, normal life, as much as you can in a situation like this. And it just shows that, you know, usually when you see a crime drama, that if there's any time given to people outside of the actual crime, it's usually the victims. But in this one, they're focused on the family of the son that committed the murder, and that's not something that you see very often. So it was quite impactful, and because they're just, the guy's having his 50th birthday, and they're just, trying to have like a normal day about it, and yet the outside world just won't let them get away from what their son did. And it was just really well done. So we have these 4 episodes. I want to really talk about what some have been calling a gimmick, but I really found that the whole fly in the wall approach really made this episodes much more impactful, because you never got a break from this tension or of the story. With most shows, you get cuts, different views or different angles, and subconsciously, I guess, you just kind of get a little bit of a mental break because of that. But this one, you're like in it. It's like you're going for a job interview and you just can't get away from the room or something like that.
Yeah.
So I found that approach very impactful. Now it's also somewhat limited in that you can only deal with one particular aspect of a story. There could be other things going on around that you might find more interesting or want to know about, but you can't, because you're locked into this one particular viewpoint. And I found that it made things more intense because of that. So, Karen, why don't you talk about that?
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I know some people are saying it might be gimmicky or whatever, but I don't consider that a thing. It's just a different way of telling the story, and it's so immersive that it really pulls you in. To me, I understand that, and we were talking about computers before, but in this era of computers and social media and all that, our attention spans have gotten much shorter. But as you and me growing up without that sort of thing, I think our attention spans are more used to sitting down and watching an hour of TV, So for me, I just sat there the whole time and I was riveted, that no pausing, nothing. So on my end, it was almost the same as on their end. They did one continuous shot and I did one continuous watch. I thought it was amazing the way they did it, and so effective. I mean, they're telling a different story in a different way, and so if they're using an unorthodox method to do that, then more power to them. I just think it's incredibly creative. So,
Yeah, I think it really was probably most effective in the first episode with the arrest of the son, Jamie,
Mm,
because we just follow the police, like SWAT or whatever you want to call them, squad. Uh, they break into the house using the battering ram and all that, and like the father's just getting up, getting ready for work, and everybody else is in bed or whatever. And when you see that they're break into the room of a boy, and it's just a boy, like you're going like, what's going on here, And then they take him away, and for maybe half the episode, you don't really know, like, that he's done something. You're kind of getting the idea that he's done something really bad, but they don't really come out and tell you what it is until they do the police interview, which is, I don't know, 3/4 of the way, halfway through the episode. So there's a lot of, like sitting with the parents at the police station, and it's like this constant tension and dread. Nobody's answering your questions. They're all being very circumspect. The police seem very remote, distant, and it's it's just the tension level for me was just off the charts. Did you feel the same way about that stuff? Or?
I did. And I hadn't really done a deep dive into the background of the story before I watched it. And I was like, okay, did he do something or have they got the wrong kid?
Yeah.
So is that going to be the story that he's trying to fight to be exonerated or whatever?
Right.
And man, that turn when they show the video, I was stunned.
Yep.
And then, of course, it's the rest of the series is just this incredible, even though that he did it, they still managed to find things that grab your attention and pull you in. So that first episode, when they broke in, it was, it's like a cold open of a show where they break in, you're right in the middle of the action. And I actually, until about I don't know, halfway through or so, I didn't realize it was just one camera scene the whole way.
Okay.
And then when they were driving, I realized, well, they're really showing us them driving. And then I was like, okay, I got to look into this. And it was like, after I watched that first episode, I did, look into the background of the show and how it was filmed and all that. And I was gobsmacked, to use an English term. It really, it floored me knowing that they did it all. It's not just one take. They didn't make any cuts in it. They did many, I think like up to 12 takes of the whole show. So hour-long takes. But what they showed you was one of those 12 hour-long takes. Whichever one was the best. 12 was in the case of the first one because they broke 12 doors. That was one of the facts that I read.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, just everything about that first episode, it really pulled me in. I actually emailed you and said, wow.
Yeah.
I think that was the only word in my email, maybe.
Yeah.
And you understood what I was saying. And and really, honestly, wow is a good term to describe it. I'm really impressed with all of this.
Yeah, it's. I think that the most gut-wrenching moment for me was, all throughout the episode, the boy kept on saying, "I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong." Never said that he didn't do it. He just kept on saying, "I didn't do anything wrong."
Wrong, right?
But the father took that to mean that he was innocent of the crime. And then when they see that video together, when his son, tries to come to his dad to get a hug, his first impulse of the father is a bit like he recoils a bit, but then he overcomes that, and then they hug each other. Like, that was so powerfully done. The boy was good, the actor, but Stephen Graham, who plays the father, like, he to me was a standout in this series.
Yeah,
He's
definitely.
portrayal of that father. Just like if you can put yourself in the position of such a situation of being the father of something that's happened like this, like the guilt is just unbearable for the
Yeah,
father.
I can't
And
imagine what was going through his mind.
mm-hmm.
I mean, he had to have like a Rolodex up there flipping through all kinds of feelings.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then, his son reaches over to give him a hug, and he's not through with that yet.
Yeah,
He's still processing, and he does know that his son killed someone.
yeah,
And that it's such a natural reaction is to say, "Oh, I don't know about you right now."
exactly,
Um, but then he realizes, hey, it's still my son. I
exactly.
got to comfort him. He's a kid. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And Stephen Graham is also one of the showrunners,
Oh,
which I love, along with, what's his name? Jack Thorne.
mm,
Uh, I think they did a great job. Um, Stephen Graham has done quite a few things in England.
yeah.
Some of the things I read about. And one of the other cast members was in The Crown. I don't remember which one,
Okay.
but yeah, they were all so great. I don't have a complaint about any of the actors, and that scene in particular was crazy.
Yeah. So the first episode just sets the tone for the rest of the series. I I have to admit the episode, because they just call them episode 1, 2, 3, 4. They don't have name titles. So episode 2 dealt with the cops going to the school trying to flush out their case. I found that one probably the least impacting, but it was disturbing just on the level of how the culture of high school is, like between the students and the teachers, and in between the students, um, and how blind the cops were to the underlying tone of what was going on, because the kids are using like all these social media apps, Instagram and whatnot, and the emojis, they were totally oblivious to what the hidden meaning was of those.
Yeah,
So
which I can identify with. I had no idea. Right?
yeah, so yeah, and it takes the cop's son to tell him that, like, no, this Jamie boy was being targeted, um, and called an incel. So he was being cyberbullied by the girl that he ended up killing. I think the only the only funny thing is when the one kid ran away. His One of
Right?
Jamie's friends. That was kind
Yeah.
of hilarious, and the cop was chasing him, and the kid was more worried about, or more interested in the cop from the perspective of how well he did with girls when he was in high school, and
Yep.
that. So that was, there's a girl dead, and this is what you're worried about.
Yeah.
But
I
it was
mean,
just like
they're
the whole,
kids. Everything's about them, right?
yeah, their viewpoint is so narrow, but the whole school environment was just like, thank God. I just said to myself, thank God I'm not going to school anymore, because I
I
just don't know. I
agree.
couldn't handle it. It's
Yeah.
like a
And the
it's like a
teachers were
jungle,
so,
clueless.
they were so like not interested in anything that was
Yeah,
going on. They were
yeah,
not invested at all. They didn't want to be there. And I think that's a product of a lot of different things. And I think it rings true to me.
yeah,
They're severely underpaid. They have more students to teach. There's more disconnection between them and their students. It broke my heart because it means that those students are being cheated. And I mean, the teachers are being cheated too, but it isn't a great environment to foster education. And I mean, that's true in America as well. But wow, I I don't doubt it's like that in schools, and it made me happy too, because my educational experience was so valuable to me, and my teachers were incredible. I mean, I had a few teachers that were duds, but overall, they were very nurturing. And I think today it's so difficult, and the different ways you can be bullied now
yep,
are I mean, that's
Much more
insane.
psychological. Yeah.
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 And kids are terrible. I mean,
Yes.
honestly, they don't have boundaries. And if you're a bad kid, you're a really bad kid. Um, I tend to think that Jamie was not the worst kid in his class, most likely, but was pushed into doing something that he normally wouldn't have done. And I think that had a lot to do with that environment. And yeah, it was heartbreaking. And I think episode 2 is also the most technological. It took the most effort to be made. They had to do a lot of handoffs. There was a lot of drone work. Um, and I saw, I'll put a drop in for one of my favorite creators on YouTube, the Corridor Crew. They do breakdowns of like how special effects are made, and they talk about like bad special effects and good special effects. And they
Right.
did dedicate a few minutes to Adolescence this last week, and they showed that scene where the kid bolts out the window, and in that case the left-hand window wasn't really there, even though there's fingerprints on it. Those were digitally added afterwards. But they had a cameraman inside the classroom who ran with the boy, handed the camera to someone on the outside through that window, and then they went off. And as he's filming the boy, 2 other crew members come in with a drone, attach it to the camera, and then the drone takes off into the
Wow.
sky. So, I mean, just that one shot was
Right.
so technologically advanced, I thought. And for that to be that episode that is, I feel like it's more incidental than everything else.
Yeah.
It just shows how much dedication they put into the show, that, hey,
Yeah.
we got to show some backstory, but we're still going to do it up
Yeah.
to the standards of the rest of the show.
Yeah. That's interesting, that breakdown that you gave me. I would think that I would call that more of a practical solution than a technical
Oh, yeah, yeah,
solution,
yeah.
because I know, like, one of the most famous shots I always remember is from Contact, when the camera goes through the bedroom window.
Yep.
I mean, that's a CGI effect, because they just uh, made it
There's
look like the
another
camera.
effect in Contact where she's running down the hallway as a little
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
a mirror.
she runs into the mirror, and it turns around and gives the perspective of her. That shot was done practically.
Yeah.
They had another girl on the other side of the mirror and all that. So yeah, I mean, I do say technologically advanced, and I think it's both. It's practical,
Yeah.
definitely, because they
From the
did it
drone
there.
perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's some technical aspects to it as well. I mean, they did do some CGI after the fact, which I think is cool, to make there's a window there, right?
Yeah.
So I just think it was so demanding,
Yeah.
the dedication they put into
That
it.
sequence was really the only moment where I had a bit of a chuckle.
Right?
Yeah. That was well done.
Where
I
the
mean,
kid
and then the heartbreaking thing, there was one kind of small glimmer of something nice, was when the police detective invites his son to go for something to eat. And because they've been kind of estranged before this. So that was the one ray of sunshine in this whole thing. But then the closing shot, when the father, Eddie, goes to the memorial site for where the girl, I think her name was Katie, was killed.
Katie, yeah.
He leaves a bouquet of flowers there.
Yeah.
Which was, I was just afraid that one of the other parents or somebody that recognized him, being the father of the boy that killed her, was going to be there, and that would break out into some sort of violent incident. But fortunately, that didn't happen.
I'm glad, because that's a trope. I mean,
yeah.
They're trying to show that, he's just a normal guy.
Yeah. And then episode 3 was the standout one for the actor who played Jamie. And I should mention too that part of why this works so well is the casting, because Owen Cooper, who plays Jamie, is just an average looking kid. Like, there's he's not he's not stereotypical in any sort of fashion design or dress or anything. Like, he doesn't have piercings or tattoos or anything. He's just a regular kid, you know. He's got a normal
Yep.
haircut, wears normal clothes. It was kind of funny that, you know, with these schools, like they'll have to wear like what I call the Catholic uniform, like the jacket and the dress, or the jacket and the slacks, or the V-neck sweater with the tie for the guys, I
Yep.
guess. But it's just a affectation or false front. Like it doesn't really reflect how they act
Right.
as people, because you would expect people dressed that way to be much more like it's trying to recapture an era that's gone, like, you
Right.
know, where the people were kids respected their elders and that, like that just doesn't exist anymore. And so it's kind of an illusion that they dress like that.
Yeah, I think when that was effective is when that was, you know, being just like everyone else in the school by dressing similarly
Yeah,
was effective. I mean, now these kids go home and they can do whatever they want. You know, they get on
yeah,
the internet, they do all that stuff, and so they're actually individuals. And dressing the same as everyone else, it does get rid of, you know, a couple of things that are problematic in schools, like trying to be trendy and being made fun of for your clothes and that sort of thing. But then all it does is it brings these horrible other ways of being bullied. And I mean, he was bullied on all sides. And
yeah.
I think his clothes didn't help him at all.
No.
And yeah, I agree with you. I think that was something, I think there's a place for it,
Hmm.
because that was the one thing that kind of bothered me growing up, because I was so tall. I was 5'9" in the 7th grade,
Mm.
and that it was difficult for me because I had to go to an adult, you know, section of the store to get like pants that were tall enough to fit me, at least back then in the 70s. And so, you know, I didn't have the designer teen stuff that was in all the teen sections. And I didn't get bullied for it because I grew up with my classmates. I'm from a pretty small town. And if they bullied me, my mom would have told their mom, you know. So but it was irritating that, you know, I couldn't
Yeah,
really share that kind of thing. And so if I had a uniform, I think that would have been gone. I wouldn't have been envious of other people's clothes. So it again, it shows another facet of growing up in modern times where
yeah,
something from the past isn't effective anymore. It doesn't work anymore
yeah,
because of how things happen.
yeah. So then, probably what I would think is the standout episode for probably most people would be episode 3, where the forensic psychologist Brioni Ariston, we'll just call her Bree for short to make it simple,
Sure.
interviews Jamie, and from that interview, we finally get our real first look inside Jamie's head, and um, it might be a little bit of a probably this is one of the few episodes where I think maybe the format made it difficult to properly get across how disturbing that peak was, because I think the reaction of the psychologist, the way she had to sort of like, you know, flutter her hand over her chest like she was having a heat
Yeah.
heat stroke or something, after her interviews with him, were probably like a little, to me, overdone. I think as a psychologist who's been doing this job for a while, she's probably seen a lot worse from other people, but maybe because it's a younger guy or a child,
Sure.
her reaction was quite strong. But you know, it was interesting to see how Jamie was, like, you could tell he was smart,
Mm.
street smart, people smart. I don't know about book smart, but definitely he's not stupid. So he was trying to toy with her to a certain degree, I guess you could say.
Yep.
And she didn't take the bait very often, and she kept on, you know, she kept on telling him that she's not here for his confession. She's just trying to get a feel for who he is as a person. He was he was kind of touchy about his dad. Anytime she asked about his dad, he would get uptight. That to me, maybe you have a different view on that. That to me was never really fully resolved. It
Mm.
kind of was left hanging, and whether that was purposeful or they just, maybe it just I was just super sensitive to that. I don't know, but what was your reactions to that scene, no, episode?
I do agree with you. I think that they left a lot of things for us to interpret, especially about their relationship between the father and son. We do see a little resolution in the last episode with him questioning how they raised him. And I think that where it gets kind of super interesting is that he chose his father to be his adult representation over his mother,
Right.
who I think would have been a more comforting choice, but he didn't want that. He wanted someone that might understand what he did.
Or
At least that's what I thought.
or somebody who would stand up for him.
Right,
And,
exactly.
and wouldn't be afraid of being strong or aggressive.
Right. Because his father did yell, and maybe he had a bit of affinity for how his dad acted. And
they did mention that his dad had a temper.
Yeah. And he showed that in the last episode too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting, and especially when the mother said, well, why did he ask you? Why didn't he call me? She was very hurt in that first episode.
Yeah.
And so I think that challenging the relationship he had with his father was also like a hit to that whole manosphere thing. Hey, don't talk bad about guys, because, guys are going to be guys. I got this, man bond with my dad. And that had a lot to do with this third episode, was how he felt about himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he kind of put some of that back on his dad in order to disassociate with it. Well, my dad's that way, so, I'm that way too. It's his fault for yelling and screaming, at least, subconsciously, I think. He yells, why can't I yell? And and I think that made him very defensive about it. Don't talk about my dad that way, because I'm that way too. And I did think that her reactions were visceral. You could tell how, she was trained to not react to people. It made me wonder if she dealt only with children, like she's a child psychiatrist, and she's not used to, children that are this aggressive towards her. And that's why she was so over the top in her emotions after the fact. But I mean, they never really made that clear, so I can't draw that conclusion. But yeah, the way she broke down afterwards, I thought was crazy. And it was just so cool to see him go through all those emotions. That actor, I hope he has a bright future ahead of him, because man, in that episode in particular, showed his range from vulnerable to normal to this really violent, angry kid. And I loved all the emotions in this episode. I think it was like the most stripped back episode for me. It showed everything.
Yeah. And the boy portrayed such a desperation to be wanting to be liked. He wanted to be liked by the psychiatrist or psychologist, sorry. And I think that we can infer from that he really wanted to be liked by the girl that he ended up killing. And they get the whole school social culture thing where apparently this girl took a topless photo of herself and sent it to somebody she was attracted to. Yeah. And of course that got sent around the whole school. Like, it just shows like the social pressures that these kids are going to, and their naivete at times as well. And then just the act of violence that takes place is, I think that the kids are desensitized to violence, which is why I think the boy kept on saying he didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
But
Yeah, she pushed him into it, I think,
yeah,
was his
she
mindset.
she was um, teasing him, or what do you call it, or targeting him on social media as well
Yeah.
after that, because she, he just had this kind of creepy thought process that because she was being ostracized because of that picture, that she would be vulnerable and then would go out with him. Like that was
Right.
like, that is such a creepy chain of
Mhm.
logic that it was just so yeah, so that definitely, this is the most showy episode, and again, you don't get like every cast member in every episode, so like it's really interesting. Like the boy is really only featured in episode 1 and 3. The family's in episode 1 and 4. The policemen are in the first 2 episodes, and they don't really I don't think they show up anymore after that. The
No.
psychologist is only in episode 3, and then the 4th episode, which we haven't talked about yet, is just the family, the Millers. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very like the Millers, like the Smiths,
Right.
the Jones, the Millers, um, and we've talked about it a bit already, that it's Eddie's 50th birthday. That's the father, and they're just trying to have a normal, like, celebrate, like a birthday celebration. This is a big birthday for him, and it's all falls apart when he goes outside and somebody's spray painted a logo or an epithet on his van, his work van. And so then he kind of loses it. They had initially planned to go out to see a movie and that, but now that he wants to get that logo off his van, so they go to the hardware store to buy some paint remover. Um, and he basically finds out that's not going to work. So he just ends up buying a pail of blue paint. And then one of the employees at the store recognizes him and says that, we're behind you and your son. And like he did the right thing. And the implication, there's racial undertones there. So, and then the father runs down one of the boys who he believes did it. And then we see his temper, where he throws a boy's bike. And then they go home, and the father just has like that quiet breakdown of like feeling so guilty about the fact that they raised a murderer. And
Yeah.
the show doesn't offer any solutions, or doesn't tie anything to a bow. This is a slice of life, and you can imagine that this is how it plays out for people that are really in this situation. So I it's just like you feel obviously for the family of the daughter that's been killed, but the family of the son, who are a perfectly normal family, have to carry this guilt. I don't know if you want to call it survivor's guilt or just crime guilt with them for the rest of their lives. Like they're, like the girl, that the daughter at one time says everybody calls her Jamie's sister. Like
Yeah.
that's her kind of label. So it's just a very downbeat, sad episode. And when the son calls and says that he's going to plead guilty, that's just kind of like puts a bow on the whole episode, I guess you could say, in a way.
Yeah.
So, and I thought this was the father's strongest episode. I thought Stephen Graham just did a fantastic job.
He did a great job.
Yeah.
That I loved, again, all the emotions that he goes through. It was, it said 18 months later or something at the beginning of the episode. And I knew it wasn't going to be, hey, their life is back to normal, but
yeah,
it started out in a very normal way. With them going to celebrate his birthday. She's making a special breakfast for him, getting cards in the mail. And then they get that one from Jamie. And that's where things start getting a little darker. By the way, what was written on the van was nonce, which is a term for like a sexual predator in Great Britain. So I mean, I could see where it would be like spray painting pedo on the side of someone's van here in America, like pedophile.
Right.
And I think it's immaterial what it said. It was that he can't escape it. And not only can he not escape it, but now it's out there for everyone to see. He's going to drive around with this on his van, and people are going to, know what he's done. And he didn't do anything, but he carries that weight of, what did I do to create this monster? And I think that his family, his wife and daughter, they were indulging him for sure, but they also thought, well, we have to do this because there's no other way. We have to make sure that he is validated, because in turn, it means that our life is normal. We're going to go out and do this stuff and interact with the public, and, things are getting better. And it turns out, well, yeah, things are better, but everywhere he goes, people are going to recognize him. And part of me says, well, I don't recognize the family members of a mass murderer or whatever. But I'm assuming the people in that neighborhood would recognize them as the family that raised this murderer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's realistic in that way. I wanted them to move away, to be fair.
Right.
But the daughter was right, I think. Hey, my friends are here. My school is here. I'm strong. I can get through this. Don't worry about me. And, she overhears her parents talking about, well, we should move for our daughter. And she says, don't do that. Which I thought was amazing as well.
Yeah, me too.
And it shows the dichotomy between, how he turned out, how Jamie turned out, and how the daughter turned out, that they couldn't have been more different.
Mm-hmm.
That in one way, they both have very strong personalities, but she uses her personality for good, and he was, I won't say evil, because I do think that a lot of things contributed to what he did, but he's definitely not a great kid. I think, the way that the pressure of life affected both of them is, it was cool to see that, she has pressure too.
Mm-hmm.
She probably had the same kind of things happening to her growing up. And instead of lashing out or buying into a certain mindset, she just said, well, you know what? I'll get through it. I have friends. I have, and in Jamie's case, his friends bought into the same crap that he did.
Yeah.
So I thought seeing her in that 4th episode was underrated. Although I think the father was, he carried that episode on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
He was, it shows the strength of those actors.
Yeah.
And, they had a lot to do as well in the one take environment. They really had to dance a delicate dance. And it shows a lot about how they, that episode also had a lot of, interesting blocking, and I hesitate to use the word, but technicality in it. The way they had to set everything up. They practiced a lot to do those episodes. And that one, it used some drone work. It used some, they had to get 2 different vans. And the spray paint was, not the spray paint, the paint that he throws on the van was a special kind of paint that they could wash off, but it wasn't, it was viscous enough to stick to the van. So they didn't have to use a different van every time, but the, little things like that. It does show the strength of those actors as well to handle that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
again, just crazy talent.
Yeah. I think the most surprising thing I found out about it was that the boy that played Jamie Miller, Owen Cooper, this was his first acting job.
Yep.
It just blew me away when I found that out.
Same. Natural talent.
Yeah.
It has to be natural talent because
yeah.
Wow.
So is there anything else you want to say about the show? Because I'd like to talk a little bit about the impact the show has had since its release. And in case I don't think we've mentioned it, this is on Netflix if you're interested in watching this. So
right. Well, I don't know if you're going to mention it, but I wanted to talk about this whole manosphere thing. Were you going to talk about that?
That's what I was going to get into now.
Okay, so go ahead and introduce that, and we'll talk about it.
Okay, so the show is, for its subject matter and the way it's filmed, and actually for the casting, has become somewhat controversial. I mean, we've mentioned the idea that the fact that some people thought that the one-shot thing was a gimmick, but I as we've discussed, I think it was very effective in achieving its goals. The show doesn't really get into it too much in the aspect of what the boy does on the computer, but there's this whole manosphere that it's labeled at, where people watch content that has a very specific viewpoint of misogynist, racial type of behavior. Andrew Tate has been quoted in Wiki here as being kind of like the figurehead that a lot of these young impressionable boys look up to. And if you've heard anything about Andrew Tate, he's been in the news lately as well, so you can check out his position on things. But
he's also based in Great Britain.
Yes.
So.
And also there was a series of knife crimes by teenagers in the UK, including the murders of 3 girls at the very least. So I don't know if this is a composite of those ones or not, but its reception was, from a critical standpoint, is very positive. It's got like a 9.5, 9.4 on Rotten Tomatoes. It's been quoted as being the closest thing to TV perfection in decades. It was recommended as being mandatory viewing by schools for the age group. And then there's some weird stuff that comes out of it too, because the original crime, I think, was a black boy and a black girl, and Elon Musk has called it a anti-white propaganda show because they cast the boy as a white.
Yeah, but they would have said something similar if it was a black kid too.
Yeah.
That, hey, it's not all black people. Yeah.
And the co-writer Jack Thorne says the claim is ridiculous and stated the television series was not based on any real life events. I find that kind of hard to believe, because where else would they got the idea from? But it just goes to show in this heightened era of social media communications, anything that people just previous to that era would have just taken at face value, now everything becomes like a conspiracy or whatnot. So even the reaction to this show shows how much people are bombarded by disparate viewpoints about anything nowadays. I mean, you can also look at recently, like there was this new Snow White movie, had a lot of issues before live action came out, whereas if you look at the original cartoon, you could say that there's certain stereotypical behavior in that. But it, they're products of their era. So it's very difficult in this day and age to produce anything without controversy. And I think that,
I mean, it would help if the current Snow White was good, but
that's another issue. But its issues were already there before the movie even aired. So it's just, it's anything that's produced nowadays. I think that the show is a perfect example of the controversy, or it's just impossible to get people to agree on things anymore. And unfortunately, social media makes it very easy to create bubbles or tribes of viewpoints. And I think that that's evident not only what the show was trying to do, but in its reception in the real world as well. So, anything you want to say about that, Karen? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I do. One of my weaknesses is listening to podcasts where they talk about like Reddit stories, and a lot of things come up that have to do with the manosphere. Women saying, "What do I do because my husband is saying that I'm cheating financially by using our money?" And that's just one example. I mean, there's other things as well that, my husband wants me to stay home and cook. He wants me to be a trad wife, which is, a term for traditional wife. And there's just so much vitriol and hate and pushback from this whole manosphere thing. There's a lot of different facets to it. And the guys that have organized this type of thing, and it is an organized thing, I think, they really do go to great lengths to hide their opinion, but also make sure that it's hitting the right people. They really do fly under the radar until they're exposed. And I do have some personal experience. Gamergate is also part of that whole thing before it was called Manosphere. And there are very misogynistic attitudes as a female gamer. And I mean, I'm lucky enough that I'm, not a personality in gaming, but, when it becomes apparent that I'm a girl who plays video games, I do get some hatred for it. I was told that, I can't play, I'm too slow because I'm a girl. And until they knew I was a girl, I was fine. But once they learn I'm a girl, it's, amazing how, and, send me nudes was one, that's a big deal too. No, truly. And guys hitting me up and going, "Hey, I like your outfit in the game." And come on. It's pixels. If you're getting excited over pixels, I can't help you.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of that, and it's pervasive.
Yes,
And
it is. I mean,
it's scary.
sorry
No, that's
sorry to
okay.
cut in, but I just want to, relay some of my personal experience with this. I've seen situations where you have like a chat, like a YouTube or Twitter chat or something, where you have like the host and a guest or something in there. They're doing a video, and if it's two guys talking, the comments are all about the topic or whatever. But if it's a guy and a girl, you see a sprinkling of comments that, "Oh, I love her hair." He says, "Oh, she's pretty.
Yep.
Is she married? Is she, seeing anybody?"
Or,
I'm going, people,
"What a bitch, she's ugly."
Yeah, that
There's
too.
that too.
But yeah, so like guys make these comments about women on these shows, but they never make, girls rarely say, "Oh, that guy's really cute," or whatever. Or
I mean, I do, but
it happens, but
that's
not
terrible.
in the chat so much. But
Yeah.
but there's this weird objectification of women by men that you can see it when you're watching stuff on the internet and stuff like that. And it's just like that culture, like that's a, I'm not saying I don't consider that behavior, how would I say it, wrong, or I just don't think it's polite. I guess it's like it's not respectful.
Some of it, yeah.
It's
some of it is wrong.
Yeah,
but yeah, saying someone's pretty or their hair is nice or
like
whatever.
If you that, to me, that's something you say to somebody in person, one-on-one.
Right.
You like, or at a family gathering where everybody else, and it's not like you're coming on to the person. because I think for women that must be uncomfortable when somebody tells you, a stranger tells you you're pretty in a bunch of in front of
Yeah.
other strangers or people that you don't know really well. So that this is what we're talking about is a very minor example of this bigger manosphere thing that's going on. And I have to be honest, this is the first time I've heard of this
Really?
term. I just would figure that it would be more like right wing
No, it's
misogynist
everywhere.
behavior, but there's this whole manosphere
Everywhere.
thing going on. So
Yeah. And they manufacture podcasts, and I say manufacture, and I mean that as in they get women on the show and they script what the women are going to say in order to make their point. It's
right.
entirely produced in a way so their point has gotten across. And
Yeah.
they ask women, hey, what do you find attractive in a man? And the woman will say, oh, well, he has to have a nice car and money. And and then they make the girl look shallow, and they end up berating her, and so they're putting it across as this is how all women are, and we really have to train them better. And there's a lot of it's so demeaning. Women say that this happens every day. And it does happen every day. I don't go outside very often.
Right.
But, when I worked, I would, on the train, I would take the metro to work every day. And there were guys that were like, hey, why don't you smile? No kidding. That's the thing. You should smile more. And, oh, your hair's so pretty. And they'd reach out and touch it. And it was uncomfortable. Every day was me tiptoeing through a minefield. And if I made it to work without a guy eyeing me I have boobs, right? And they're not small. So I couldn't wear anything with like a V-neck or anything like that if I didn't want to get stared at.
Yeah.
And to change the way I dress in order to make myself more comfortable around men, it shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't. And also, I was in computer science, and that was a whole other minefield of disrespect towards me. A lot of guys were happy. I'm not going to say every guy was, but
right.
It's more than people think if you don't have it happen to you.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of men that say, oh, you're exaggerating. Well, how can every single woman be exaggerating? Because I don't know anyone that hasn't had at least one or two experiences. And if you're out in the public and you're doing something around men, good luck.
Yeah.
There's a lot, and it's getting worse and worse because of the culture we live in. Our election went this way because of misogyny. We elected, and I'm not saying me, but we elected a misogynist to our highest office over having a woman and a huge criminal. I mean, there's a list of horrible things they've done, but over having a woman, because people cannot stomach
especially
having
a black woman,
a black Indian woman. I mean, she had all that going against her, and she started late in the campaign. And people already, we saw it with Hillary Clinton, that people didn't want her, but there was this thought that well, Hillary has a reputation from already being the first lady, but Kamala has a whole different perspective. She's a lawyer. She was incredibly qualified.
Camilla, I mean,
Kamala.
Not Kamala. Not Kamala. Hillary.
Yeah.
She had a lot of baggage from her husband, so there's that too. But
right.
I think the main thing, if I were to leave one thing with anybody who's listened to us this far, is that even though this show was recommended to be as required viewing in high schools, I kind of think it should be required viewing for any adult,
everyone,
because but unfortunately, the people that need to see this the most will probably never watch it.
Right.
But if you're, you know, it if you're anybody who's, you know, worried about the impact of the internet or anything like that, not just on your children but on you, I think that this show is an eye opener,
Mm,
or at least it makes you examine your feelings and thoughts about the internet, and maybe it would help you to be a little, if you're someone who's, you know, spends a lot of time on the internet, would be just maybe a little more circumspect in your responses and things like that,
yeah.
because you don't know other
And
people's situations and whatnot. So that,
this kind of behavior has become normalized.
yes,
And I think there needs to be more pushback against it.
yeah.
We've gotten complacent.
I
And
mean, when you, yeah, and especially like when you see that these kind of crimes are being committed by kids, like
mm-hmm,
that shows you that something's really bad. I mean, in this show is based on what's going on in Britain. I mean, that this is where there's much stricter gun laws, and so like these are the knifing crimes.
yep,
Um, I'm surprised in a way that there's not a similar uh, kind of thing going on in the States where guns are much more prevalent. I mean, maybe this is what, but school shootings don't seem to be related to this kind of
well, they're
one
being bullied.
person. Yeah, if they're
And
bullied, if they're
yeah,
being, you know, ostracized. But yeah, I mean, we could go down a big rabbit hole on a whole bunch of topics, and
right.
I don't want to get too political with this, but I just think that this kind of show, in a sea of media now that there's just so many streaming shows, this was an eye opener for me.
Yeah,
Whether it was because of the way it was shot, um, definitely, I think definitely is a part of it. But I just think the way that it handled the subject matter in a realistic way, and didn't give us this sort of disposable, neat, tidy, wrapped in a bow. There's been a crime, it's been solved, and
yep,
everything's set to normal. I mean, I I enjoy that show as much
sure.
as the next person, but I think it dulls your senses to the actual crime, that impact of crime, uh, how it really plays out in the real world. So
Yeah.
that's
And
where I would close off with my
this was kind
comments.
of the psychological side of things.
Yes.
It did a deep dive into behind the scenes of a crime like this, and I
Yeah.
think that's very novel. I think if it was told from a American point of view, it wouldn't have done so well,
Maybe. Yeah.
because this
Violence
was
is
a
much
whole
more
different.
accepted in the States. Sorry,
Right,
but it's true.
exactly. No kidding.
And I'm not, as a Canadian, I'm not saying that Canada is any better. And we're maybe more in the British mode because we have stricter gun laws as well. But yeah, the bullying in schools and that, and the whole manosphere stuff it's prevalent everywhere that the internet is available. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and
So
men live. No
yeah,
offense to you, but
yeah. So there you go. I can't believe we talked about this for an hour. That's
right?
pretty unbelievable.
Well,
So any last
it was
words?
important.
Yeah. Any
I
last
think,
words, Karen?
yeah, like you, this, I think we should lock people in a theater and make them watch it.
Yeah.
Um, because I do think that it's valuable to be seen by people that might be swayed by it.
Yeah.
Us talking about it, yeah, we get it. And it's great. It was amazing television. We just came off watching Severance, which is also peak
Yep.
television, peak storytelling. And
Yep.
then to go right into this again, it really renews my hope in the form of television miniseries type of things
Yeah.
instead of movies.
Yeah.
Um,
And you just sparked another thought for me. And I think that the approach the show took with the one shot um, motif, it needed to differentiate itself in a
mhm,
stream of, a deluge of content. And there's like only a handful of shows, like you mentioned Severance, which is a great show, but there's other stuff that's up, high profile stuff. Like I've been watching Wheel of Time, the
mhm,
Ring of Powers. These are high profile shows that people watch, but they're much more, like, to be honest, they're fluffy compared to
right.
something like this. And so I think that they were very acute or perceptive and shooting the show this way. And
Yep.
I just think, even if it's not your cup of tea, I highly recommend that everybody watch it, especially if you have kids.
Yeah.
It may spark some discussions. You should watch it with your teenage kids and see how they relate to it. That would be an interesting experiment too.
It would be. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, most people would benefit from this. And I think the funny thing is, Jesse's not here, but Jesse's such a kind soul. I don't think that he really needs to see this, because he's
I
already
agree.
living the
Yeah.
life of respecting other people and being kind to everyone. So
Not that we're not, but
no,
he
but
is.
Jesse's on another level.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he's such a good soul. So,
He
and
is.
I don't mean to. I'm not denigrating you at all, Karen.
No,
'Cause
no, no.
I put you
I
up there
get
as
it.
well.
I
So
agree with you.
yeah, but
He is a
yeah,
shining light in my life for
yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah.
So hopefully Jesse won't listen to this and get all blushy on us. But
I hope so.
there you go, folks. I highly recommend you check it out, even if it's not your cup of tea. And yeah, I think that's where we'll leave it at.
Yep.
How about you, Karen?
I agree. I
Okay.
think that's a great place.
So if people want to talk to you, where would they go to do that?
Well, don't say I need a new smile. I need to smile more, but you can find me on social media at Aliveria, Aleveria. My blog is aliesstuff.com, and there's a bunch of links there on the landing page that might be interesting. And that's it. You can also email us at jklmediareviews@gmail.com.
Fantastic. And of course, you can find this podcast and our other JKL Media podcasts at JKL Media Reviews on YouTube. And we've covered a range of usually one-off shows or movies, or in some instances, music. We've done Springsteen. We've done We Are the World. But then we've covered off shows like Flanagan's Midnight Mass. We've done Devs, other shows like that. Our next actual project, I believe, is going to be The Haunting of Hill House by Mike Flanagan. So I'm looking forward to that.
Same.
Karen and I have seen it. Jesse has not. So we're looking forward to
I've
that.
seen
And
it twice.
one of those episodes has a 17-minute continuous shot.
Yep.
At that time impressed me. So I was kind of
Agreed.
geared toward really watching this.
Yeah.
And beyond that, you can find my alternate YouTube channels, Lou's Reviews, where we have our now completed Babylon 5 series reviews, plus the recently released animated movie. So that should be fun for you B5ers. I also have my writer podcast interviews there, as well as my Stephen King podcasts. On Twitter, you can find me at Lou W. Sitzma, and the same at Blue Sky. And I think that's it.
I'm hoping that we'll do another Stephen King podcast soon.
He's got a book coming out soon.
Yep.
So
that was my inference.
Yep.
So.
And he's got a couple of movies coming out. I've heard big there was really good reactions to his upcoming Running Man and The Long Walk movies. So
I can't wait to see
Jesse
the Running
will
Man.
like either one of those.
Well, you and I can talk about it. Then.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
So until then, we bid you adieu. Take care, and so long.
Bye.
And scene.
The proceeding has been a JKL Media production.